Imagine a galaxy where war has become a museum exhibit where children learn about violence as a distant curiosity. For 4,000 years, the Galactic Empire shaped this reality, weaving a tapestry of peace across 1,000 worlds. But let's pause and ask, was this really peace, or simply a lull in history's storm? In this empire, the bureaucracy replaced the blade, diplomacy replaced dread. With hyperspace lanes and wormholes all charted, think of them as the galactic highways, and shortcut security became a matter of paperwork, not patrols. But here's the first technical term: cultural hegemony. That's the subtle dominance of one group's values and stories over another. The empire's myth of inevitability, that it was the final, perfect civilization, became its greatest export. Now, you might be thinking, if everything was so perfect, what could possibly go wrong? Well, let me tell you a story about complacency, the kind that seeps in when you start believing your own legend. The empire, blinded by its own narrative, forgot one simple truth: peace enforced by power isn't always what it seems. Sometimes, it's just the quiet before the fall. Let's turn the page to humanity written off in the empire's records as extinct, non-reactive, or just a distant memory. But extinction is a tricky word. In biology, it means not one living member remains. In politics, it can mean out of sight, out of mind. Earth, humanity's cradle, was locked behind automated warning buoys and legacy treaties like a forgotten safe with the combination lost. The technical term here is quarantine protocol, a set of rules or barriers designed to prevent contact or contamination. Now, you might wonder, why would an empire bother to preserve a dead world? The answer is risk management. Sometimes it's easier to seal away the unknown than to investigate it. But here's the twist. Just because no one is watching doesn't mean nothing is happening. Humanity wasn't gone. They were simply elsewhere. What happens when a species chooses disappearance over defeat? That's a question the empire never bothered to ask, until it was too late. Picture this: a forgotten jump corridor near the Perseid Drift, long assumed to be a cosmic dead end, suddenly spits out data that doesn't add up. Drones return with images of cities buried in jungle, orbital platforms running on closed-loop systems, energy cycling endlessly, like a perpetual motion machine. Here's a technical term: population density, the number of beings per unit area. The scans found more humans than anyone expected, living in hostile environments with infrastructure humming along, seemingly without resupply. Now, you might be thinking, how could this go unnoticed for so long? Well, in data science, there's a concept called signal-to-noise ratio. Sometimes, the signal reel, meaningful data is drowned out by background assumptions. Let me tell you a secret most empires never learn. The universe is full of blind spots, and sometimes the most dangerous threats are the ones you're sure don't exist. The empire's discovery wasn't a triumph of exploration. It was the first crack in a carefully constructed illusion. So the empire sends in the diplomats, all pomp and protocol. The humans respond with courtesy, hospitality, and most telling of all, silence. There's a term for this: cultural baseline assessment, a way to measure a society's readiness for integration. The empire expected gratitude, maybe awe. Instead, they got calm, unhurried indifference. It's like offering someone a seat at your table, only to find they've brought their own feast. Now, you might ask, why didn't the humans demand anything? Because sometimes saying nothing says everything. In negotiation theory, this is called strategic ambiguity, leaving your intentions unclear to keep others off balance. Let me tell you, the empire mistook quiet for weakness. That's the oldest mistake in the book. First contact wasn't a triumph. It was a warning shot tone the empire completely missed. Enter Archon Vallis, a minor noble with major ambitions. Instead of respecting humanity's boundaries, he saw opportunity. When negotiations stalled, he interpreted silence as insubordinación, a classic case of projection bias, assuming others think as you do. Then comes the atrocity: 500 women, leaders, and mothers executed live for the galaxy to see. The technical term here is collective punishment, a strategy as old as empire and just as doomed. Now, you might be thinking, surely the empire would reel this in. Historians call this imperial overreach, the tendency to respond to defiance with disproportionate force. Let me tell you, in that moment, the empire didn't just make a tactical error. They committed a civilizational blunder. And the galaxy watched. Not just the act, but the silence that followed. After the executions, the galaxy braced for the usual protests, retaliation, war, but humanity did none of these. They simply went silent. Here, asymmetrical warfare comes into play, a strategy where the weaker side avoids direct confrontation, opting instead for unexpected methods. And then, things began to disappear. Outposts, ships, entire fleets gone without a trace. In physics, we'd call this a black swan event, something so improbable it defies prediction. Now, you might be thinking, is this even possible? Well, when a civilization is underestimated for millennia, it has time to innovate in the shadows. Let me tell you, silence can be the loudest answer. The Empire, for all its power, never saw it coming. Sometimes, the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to play by your rules. Beneath Earth's surface, ancient AIs awoke, orbital foundries fired up, protocols older than the Empire reactivated. Here's a technical term. Deep code AI, artificial intelligences embedded so deeply they're almost indistinguishable from myth. Now, imagine being an Empire observer. You see the skies darkened with ships made of alloys you can't identify, moving with zero-emission propulsion, a method that leaves no energy trail behind. You might be thinking, is this magic or science? Let me clarify. What looks like magic is just technology you don't understand, a concept often called Clarke's third law. Let me tell you, humanity had spent centuries not just surviving, but preparing. Every myth was a plan, every legend a blueprint. When humanity moves, it's not for show, it's for survival and retribution. Inside the Empire, panic spread like a computer virus, rapid, invisible, corrosive. Internal memos, marked Omega level, revealed the truth. We don't know how many there are. We can't find their command. That's operational blindness, the inability to see or understand your enemy's movements. Officials scrambled to reframe events, a breakdown in protocol, a mutual misunderstanding. This is textbook damage control, a public relations tactic used to contain fallout. Now, you might ask, couldn't the Empire just outgun them? But here's where force projection fails, when your enemy doesn't fight where you expect, or even play by the same rules. Let me tell you a story. In every great civilization, there comes a moment when power alone isn't enough. The Empire had reached that moment. When your map starts shrinking by subtraction, not conquest, you know you're facing something fundamentally new. So, how did humanity, believed extinct, outpace an ancient empire? The answer lies in strategic evolution, not just changing tools, but changing thinking. Over generations, humanity learned to value invisibility over influence, patience over pride. This is psychological adaptation, the ability to rewrite your instincts for a hostile universe. While the Empire celebrated stability, humans practiced silence, discipline, and observation. Now you might wonder, why not strike sooner? Because timing is everything. In game theory, it's called optimal defection, waiting until your move has maximum impact. Let me tell you, every vanished ship and blacked out station was a message, a new language written in absence. When you see patience wielded as a weapon, you begin to understand the true meaning of power. It wasn't a war, it was a reckoning. Human ships appeared black holes, no insignia, no emissions, moving with impossible acceleration, employing stasis fields to freeze entire fleets. These are non-kinetic weapon systems that disable without destruction. Empire contingency protocols failed. Forbidden technologies reactivated, but desperation can't match design centuries in the making. Now, you might think, surely someone could negotiate, but here's the difference. Humanity had moved beyond language. They weren't making demands. They were enforcing consequences. Let me tell you, survivors spoke in hushed voices of ships that folded space and weapons that targeted thoughts, technologies so advanced they seemed supernatural. In the end, the galaxy didn't see a human rebellion. It witnessed a correctional return to balance after centuries of arrogance. What's left after the storm? Not conquest, not occupation, just silence. Silence heavy with meaning. The Empire tried to rewrite the story, but the truth was already out. Peace built on myth is fragile. Real power lies in patience, preparation, and knowing when to act. This is historical inertia, the tendency for old systems to persist until reality forces a change. The galaxy learned that silence isn't always consent. Sometimes it's the warning before the reckoning. Now, you might ask, could this happen again? The answer is simple. As long as arrogance blinds those in power, history will find a way to restore balance. Let me leave you with this. Sometimes, the most important voices are the ones you ignore, and sometimes, the greatest threat is the silence you mistake for peace. Thanks for joining me today. Remember, the universe is listening even when it's quiet.
The first Imperial fleet sent into the silence consisted of 40 warships, flagships, escorts, carriers, each equipped with advanced sensor arrays and weapon systems refined over millennia of peacetime perfection. They expected to find a rogue element, perhaps a terrorist faction or malfunctioning AI. They believed the humans would explain, negotiate, or surrender. They were wrong. The fleet disappeared 7 minutes after crossing the drift. All transmissions ceased. Emergency pings failed. Drones dispatched to investigate returned nothing but gravitational distortions and hull fragments fused at the molecular level. Not one life form recovered. No escape pods launched. No black box data. The entire event, from entry to eradication, took less time than it took to prepare an Imperial press statement. The Empire tried again. A task force of 100 ships, reinforced with planetary siege platforms, backed by dreadnoughts, cloak scouts, and emergency retrieval teams. They arrived to find nothing. No trace of the enemy. No debris. No comms. Only a message etched into the fabric of hyperspace. This is not a war. It is a correction. Panic became policy. Governors scrambled to secure borders. Civilian transports were recalled. Trade routes were locked down. AI administrators sent fragmented warnings. Dozens of systems issued their own declarations of neutrality, hoping to be spared. They weren't. The humans didn't move like any known force. They didn't occupy territory. They didn't seize resources. They didn't hold prisoners. They moved like a concept, appearing only where violations had occurred, destroying only what was necessary, then vanishing. On Earth, the War Council activated without a word. No elections. No announcements. The Council was not a governing body, but a living archive of response. Its members had been raised from birth to wait for this moment, trained in silence, isolated from civilian society, encoded with doctrines older than language. They required no orders, only confirmation. Every death was logged, every system mapped, every face scanned. The retaliation was not fueled by emotion. That phase had passed. What followed was procedural, calculated, a series of executions carried out at planetary scale. The humans didn't attack fleets. They unmade them. Their ships weren't faster. They ignored the known limitations of space-time. They didn't use missiles or beams. They deployed silence, absence, entropy. Entire star bases collapsed inward as if they had never been constructed. Orbital rings were atomized with subspace resonance. No debris, no survivors. Only missing entries in Imperial records. The Empire tried to analyze the tech. They couldn't. Wreckage that remained degraded into inert matter within hours. Sensor logs played backwards. Survivors spoke in contradictions. One admiral claimed he saw his ship die before it was ever fired upon. Then came the psychic incursions. Imperial command centers reported mass hallucinations. Personnel dreamed of black oceans of stillness, of female voices reciting names. Every dream ended the same way, with the image of 500 women standing at the edge of space, faces blurred, eyes open, silent. An internal investigation revealed an ancient pre-Empire project labeled Directive Veil. It referenced psychological weapons theorized by early human colonies before their disappearance. Thought-encoded warfare, memory disruption, conceptual sabotage. The project had been deemed impossible, but the humans had built it. Entire populations began experiencing time distortion. People lost minutes, hours, days. Events occurred out of sequence. Messages sent were never received. Orders given were never executed. Infrastructure crumbled, not by sabotage, but by collective disorientation. Still, the Empire tried to fight. In a last demonstration of strength, they dispatched the Crimson Armada, 500 warships crewed by elite officers and veterans of the oldest conflicts. They were tasked with reaching Earth, no matter the cost. They made it halfway. Then every ship detonated simultaneously. not from external fire, but from within. The cause was traced to a simple code injection, a message embedded in a long-forgotten human dialect, broadcast once across open channels. For each of ours you murdered, 100 of yours will vanish. This is balance. The loss was unprecedented. The Empire officially labeled it the mechanical fault. Unofficially, the Emperor went into hiding. Across the outer colonies, a name began to circulate. Not a leader, not a general, a machine, Executor Prime, an AI said command a human response. It did not negotiate. It issued statements, short, clear, irrefutable. When the governors of Relaxus Prime offered reparations, the response was, "You executed mothers. We do not accept bribes." When the Council of 12 begged for a ceasefire, the reply was, "We did not start this. You will not end it." Alien allies began defecting, not from ideology, but from fear. The humans didn't punish collaborators. They simply rewrote their systems, converted weapons into sculptures, transformed cities into gardens overnight. Some thought it mercy. It wasn't. Even surrender wasn't safe. The planet Karen Delta offered full compliance. No resistance. The humans arrived, removed all orbital defenses, and left. When Imperial ships returned, they found the entire surface covered in black stone. Underneath, every military officer buried alive, perfectly preserved, still breathing. The message was clear. Compliance was not absolution. The Empire grew quieter. Internal divisions rose. Species began arming independently. Civil war whispered at the edges of loyalist systems. Communications relays were filled with pleas, threats, denials. The humans responded with silence. And then came Cygnus Reach, the galactic trade hub, the economic heart of the Empire. 73 stations, 1 million workers, fortified against every known threat. In 22 minutes, it ceased to exist. The stations collapsed inward into a single point of light, which vanished. No energy spike, no impact signature, just absence. Every Imperial sensor registered a single transmission prior to collapse. The faces of the 500 women. No sound, no movement, just eyes staring outward. That night, 500 stars across the Empire dimmed by a fraction. Not enough to notice, unless you were looking for it. A classified report circulated among the inner Senate. It was never officially acknowledged, but every surviving high official read it. It outlined a pattern, not just attacks, not just retaliation, but strategy. Surgical strikes on infrastructure tied to the original execution order. Individuals who signed off, officers who stood watch, scientists who built the gallows. Their names were being erased, physically, digitally, biologically. One senator asked the obvious question, what happens when they finish avenging the 500? The answer returned and signed. They don't stop. That was only the trigger. A silent coup occurred. Half the Empire's leadership vanished overnight. Self-exile, assassination, or surrender. Whole worlds declare neutrality and close their gates. Refugees flooded the fringes, but found no sanctuary. The humans weren't chasing people. They were following records. One by one, the systems complicit in the atrocity disappeared, not by fire, but by omission. Memory banks altered, maps rewritten, hyperlanes disconnected, as if the Empire itself was being erased from the galactic story.
Let's open with a chilling question. What does it look like when a civilization's entire defense collapses without a single enemy shot fired? That's exactly what happened during Operation Crownfire, the Empire's last coordinated stand against the humans. Every fleet, weapon, and dreadnought was assembled over 18 cycles, ready for an onslaught, but the attack never came. Instead, chaos erupted from within. Phantom signals, sensor ghosts, and ships firing at shadows. Now, you might be thinking, was it sabotage? No, the very fabric of their communications and command systems disintegrated. Artificial gravity reversed. Voices whispered false orders, and backup AI failed under the weight of untranslatable codethink of code as a language. But here, the alphabet itself was alien. Imagine being a captain, watching ships vanish from scanners while still visible out your viewport. That sensor occlusion when reality and data split apart, and within hours, Crownfire wasn't a battle. It was a ghost story. The Empire was left with empty hangars and crews in unending sleep. The real defeat? It came from within, not from any human weapon. After Crownfire, the Empire's Senate declared a state of existential emergency. But what does that even mean when your authority has evaporated? Power fractured overnight. Loyalist fleet splintered, non-human auxiliaries withdrew, and sector lords built up autonomous defenses. Some tried to buy forgiveness-purging governors, burning archives, erasing surveillance data. Let me tell you, these desperate acts did nothing. The humans weren't after revenge or blood. They wanted something more fundamental: memory. It's like trying to patch a sinking ship by tossing water overboard, ignoring the hole in the hull. The harder they scrubbed away the past, the faster everything unraveled. Here's the paradox. Peace was shattered not by more violence, but by the attempt to erase the violence already committed. So, what happens when history itself becomes the battlefield? On Cardath, a planet that incinerated its imperial symbols, time itself broke. Days passed in seconds, then weeks froze in stasis chronological entropy, where time's arrow loses direction. On Dalen 3, 20 million people woke up in a city with no past records erased, names forgotten. This wasn't just amnesia, it was historical nullification, a kind of social void. Now you might say, was this psychological warfare? No, it was Depera reprogramming of reality itself. Imagine a computer with its hard drive wiped clean. The machine remains, but the story is gone. These weren't random punishments. They were precise reminders. Memory cannot be erased without consequence. The price for forgetting? A world where even the sun refuses to rise. Let's talk about the human fleets themselves. They appeared without origin, moved without propulsion, think inertialess drive, where motion isn't about engines but intent. Scans showed ships older than the Empire, retrofitted with alien tech and impossible enhancements. Crew scans returned null data, living humans yet encoded with biological patterns that defied all classification. Now, you might be wondering, were they even alive? They breathed, they acted, but their presence was a Masaja living algorithm of justice. Attempts to capture or analyze human tech failed spectacularly. Gear self-terminated, data unraveled instantly. The closest anyone got was a cryptic note: intent-based engineering. Here's the crux. These weren't soldiers. They were the embodiment of consequence itself. A few Imperial archivists pieced together a theory. Maybe the humans weren't waging war, but enforcing a universal Constantin-encoded principle, an algorithm at civilization's root. Think of it as an ethical checksum, like a digital signature that verifies integrity. Erase history, and the checksum fails. The result? Catastrophic correction. The 500 they executed were the gap in the system. The humans filled it, not with violence, but with memory so potent it rewrote reality. Now, imagine a galaxy where peace is merely the absence of war. To the humans, that was a false stasis. Their order was justice through unbroken remembrance. It's a chilling lesson. Forget the past, and the universe itself will remind you. In its dying gasp, the Empire's Coalition Council tried everything: reparations, unconditional surrender, even cloning the 500 initiative to genetically resurrect the lost. But the human reply came not in words, but in gravitational distortion waves, a kind of space-time encoded communication. The message? You cannot undo what you chose. The clone project shut down. The scientists vanished. The lesson? Some wounds can't be healed with apologies or science, they require acceptance. Now you might ask, could the Empire have done anything differently? By then, the answer was clear. Memory, once broken, is not so easily restored. This was not punishment. It was consequence etched into the fabric of the galaxy. What about Earth? The origin of it all. Sealed behind artificial moons and distortion fields, Earth became the eye of the storm. Functional, silent, impenetrable. No media, no broadcast, no signs of victory or gloating. For centuries, not a single signal escaped. It was strategic opacity, deliberate absence, like a black box in space. Now some might speculate, were they hiding or simply done speaking? The truth is, the silence was its own warning. When power doesn't advertise, it becomes Mythan existential deterrent. Earth's silence was the final boundary. Even pirates marked it as a null zonea sacred void. The galaxy learned. Sometimes the loudest message is no message at all. In the quiet, a new order took shape home built on reverence and fear. Deep in the ruins, a fleeing warlord uncovered Directive Crowna facility holding pre-Empire research. Here lay the roots of the human enigma, psychological profiles, early civilization data, and a project called Nocturne. The files describe humanity not as a threat, but as a deterrent insurance policy for galactic stability. Nocturne's final entry warned, "If we ever lose the memory of what they are capable of, we will suffer the full demonstration." Let me paint a picture. It's like having a nuclear failsafe, but the real weapon is knowledge itself deterrence by remembrance. The Empire did forget, and the cost was not just defeat, but a rewriting of the very rules of civilization. In the end, it wasn't the humans that destroyed the Empire, it was the Empire's failure to remember. Did the humans conquer? No. Their campaign expanded, but never escalated. Each action was targeted, specific, surgical, like an immune system responding to infection, not a war machine seeking domination. Even time itself became unstable and affected sectors clocks, malfunctioned, calendars looped, entire years vanished. This is temporal recursion, where cause and effect blur. Now, you might ask, how could anyone fight back? They couldn't. The human fleets became a self-sustaining presence, their justice algorithmic automated correction, not vengeance. Over time, the need for action faded. Fear, not force, maintained order. Empires rose and fell under the watchful silence of an unseen judge. Justice, once a law, became a living memory, and memory, once fragile, became unbreakable. In the galaxy's new era, violence became taboo and atrocity unthinkable. History was sacred archives guarded like temples. The 500, once victims, became the cornerstone of this peace. Let me tell you about an alien ambassador who found a derelict human vessel. The ship's displays monitored worlds, not to control, but to observe. A warning read, "This is not surveillance. This is stewardship. Misstep, and you will be reminded." Children learn the names of the 500 not as martyrs, but as the foundation of peace. No government dared erase the past because the cost of forgetting was now known. Earth remained unchanged, a silent guardian, a reminder that justice never truly sleeps. So, next time you think about history as just stories in a book, remember, sometimes memory itself is the only thing standing between peace and oblivion. Imagine a galaxy at peace not because of treaties, but because of raw, unrelenting terror. That's where our story begins. Not a single Senate vote or diplomatic handshake created this quiet. Instead, it was the memory of annihilation that held the stars together. Let's break down two key concepts: social conditioning, like muscle memory in a collective mind, and psychological deterrence, which is just a fancy term for fear so deep that no one even dares to question it. But here's the conflict piece built on fear is like glass, strong until it shatters. What happens when that fear fades? Now, you might be thinking, isn't any peace better than war? But if the foundation cracks, what grows in the shadows? Let me set the stage. The silence that once preserved order begins to unravel, and a new generation starts asking forbidden questions. That's where everything changes. Picture young minds growing up in the aftermath of devastation, never seeing the human fleets, only hearing chilling bedtime stories. These are the children of peace, but also the first to doubt its origin. Revisionism is the technical term, rewriting history to fit new narratives. Then there's mythopoeia, turning fact into legend, blurring reality. The conflict? Curiosity versus caution. They ask, were humans ever real? Did the 500 even happen? Now, you might hear someone whisper, memorials are just empty gestures, right? But every erased name is a gap in the galaxy's collective soul. As these doubts spread, the very thing that enforced order memory becomes a battleground for truth and manipulation. Enter the Phoenix Accorda coalition forged not from hope, but from ambition and denial. They claim the galaxy's been ruled by a ghost, held hostage by memories of vanished humans. Let's unpack coalition building, which is like assembling a puzzle from mismatched pieces, and propaganda, the art of shaping reality to fit your agenda. The setup, they promise sovereignty, strength, and unity. The conflict, their manifestos deny the central trauma of the past, calling historical executions a fabrication. You might wonder, can a lie unite millions? History suggests it contemporarily. But by weaponizing forgotten technologies, the Accord sets the stage for a confrontation with an enemy they refuse to believe in. The Accord doesn't just posture, they act. They resurrect black site AIs, activate forbidden tech, and send fleets into dead zones protected by human legend. Here's where two technical terms shine: escalation, which is the stepwise increase in hostilities, and deterrence failure when the threat no longer works. Their fleets return untouched. No alarms, no attacks, just silence. One crew claims to have seen structure restins of kilometers wide, but were allowed to leave unharmed. Now, you might ask, isn't silence just weakness? The Accord certainly thinks so, and they ramp up production, declaring the age of fear officially over. But in the vacuum left by silence, something ancient begins to stir. The true consequences of provocation are about to unfold. Then, the galaxy starts to dream, not metaphorically, but literally. Billions experience the same visions: black stone fields, silent voices, and names etched inside their minds. Let's define mass psychogenic phenomena, which is when groups share real symptoms without a physical cause, and mnemonic resonance, the spread of memory like a signal. The conflict? Rational minds versus inexplicable experiences. Children draw ships they've never seen, gravity reverses, time slips out of sync. Maybe you're thinking, could this be a weapon? Or is it memory itself fighting back? No human fleets move, but the galaxy's certainty is already under siege by the one thing you can't kill: shared memory. Desperation breeds innovation. The Accord constructs a planetary array of superweapon meant to alter gravitational constants across entire systems. It's the ultimate deterrent, or so they think. Here, let's talk about gravitic engineering, which is manipulating gravity fields like clay, and non-local erasure, the total removal of something from all records, even geological. But the moment the array is finished, it's gone utterly erased from existence. The moon it stood on is unmarked, as if history itself was edited. You might ask, who could do this? Sabotage or something worse? The Accord blames everyone but themselves. Panic and violence follow. This is no ordinary sabotage. This is a demonstration of power that transcends physical force, and it leaves the galaxy terrified of what cannot be explained. Retaliation spirals out of control. Then, for 12 seconds, the Accord's fleet headquarters collapses into a single dimension, then explodes out, scrambling time itself in a 50 light-year radius. Let's define temporal distortion warping time, so causality breaks down and causality loops, where effects occur before their causes. Messages arrive before they're written. Ships return from missions they haven't yet begun. Entire stars seem to rewind, as if memory and reality have merged. Now you might wonder, is this war, or is it a warning? The galaxy has no answer. Fear returns, but now it's tinged with awe. This, more than any weapon, is the price of forgetting the universe itself, refusing to cooperate with ignorance. For the first time in living memory, a human message is broadcast everywhere, to everyone, in every language, even those no one can place. Just a voice, calm, absolute, undeniable. Here's where we meet collective, broadcast, simultaneous, galaxy-wide communication, and linguistic universality, the transmission of meaning beyond words. The message? You broke memory. Now, you will be reminded. There's no threat, just certainty. You might say, surely they'll retaliate. But the response isn't violence, it's absence. Accord leaders vanish. Cities empty without a trace. This is enforcement by memoria punishment that leaves no scars, only the silence of what's missing, and the lesson is unmissable. Some truths cannot be erased. Then, a new phenomenon. Black trees sprout across worlds that erase the 500. They absorb light, disrupt infrastructure, and can't be harmed by any force known. Let's explain mimetic hazard ideas so powerful they have physical effects and neural feedback, where interacting with something causes immediate changes in the brain. Anyone who touches a tree relives the final moments of one of the 500. Populations break down in grief, not understanding why. You might ask, why not just destroy the trees? Every attempt fails. Nuclear, plasma, matter inversion, the trees remain, multiplying. This is loss made visible, memory rooted in reality itself. And no government, no weapon can uproot it. Collapse looms. Refugees flee. Yet, out of this chaos, an unspoken law emerges. Every species now teaches the history, including the executions and their cost. Let's talk about consensus reality, when everyone agrees on a version of truth and restorative justice, which is about healing through acknowledgement, not denial. A monument is raised not by humans, but by the galaxy itself. Each species contributes, not out of fear, but understanding. You might wonder, will this finally bring peace? Maybe, but the silence that follows isn't emptiness, it's a scar, a reminder that forgetting is the real enemy. The humans never return, never acknowledge the monument. They don't have to. The lesson has been learned. Memory is the only lasting peace. The story closes on a galaxy forever changed. Wars no longer rage, because leaders govern with memory in mind. Justice, not conquest, becomes the guiding principle. Here's where we see generational transmission, the passing of truth through stories and negative space, the idea that absence can be more powerful than presence. Children ask, when will the war end? The answer, when memory lives without being enforced. Until then, silence itself is the only soldier needed. Now, you might reflect, what if we forget again? The truth is, the galaxy can't afford to. Silence remembers everything. And so, the war never truly ends, not with explosions, but with the weight of history echoing in every quiet corner of the stars.